go ahead and get started. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Clinical Trials Community of Practice. My name is Nasia Safdar, and I'm the Faculty Director for ICTR's multi-site clinical trials. Today, we are very fortunate to have Dr. KyungMann Kim be our speaker. KyungMann Kim is Professor of Biostatistics and Statistics at UW here and serves as the Director of the Clinical Trials Program in the Department of Biostatistics and Medical Informatics. He is the PI of the Cancer Prevention Clinical Trial Network Data Management, Auditing, and Coordinating Center, and MPI of the HIV Cervical Cancer Prevention Cascade Clinical Trials Network Coordinating Center. His research interest is in statistical methods for clinical and healthcare research, including group sequential methods for interim analysis, survival analysis, and analysis of longitudinal and repeated measures data. You know, if we were to go over everything that KyungMann Kim has done in his illustrious career, we would be here all day. But suffice it to say that he has been a member of numerous advisory panels, has participated, coordinated, and led an enormous wealth of clinical trials. And we're just delighted to have his experience here today. So please think of your questions, put them in the chat. And KyungMann, thank you so much for doing this. I will turn it over to you.
All right. Thank you, Nasia, for a very kind introduction. It is my pleasure to share Data Coordinating Center resources at the University of Wisconsin. The center exists to support UW investigator-initiated multi-site clinical trials and healthcare research studies. Next slide, please. So these are some of the learning objectives that I hope you will sort of get at the end of my presentation. What is the Data Coordinating Center? When is an independent Data Coordinating Center required? And what are DCC resources at the University of Wisconsin? Next slide. So this one shows the outline of my presentation. I'll share a background that led to requiring some studies for independent data coordinating center. And then I'll get into the data coordinating center, what is it, and best practices and required expertise and resources. And then I'll talk about the data coordinating center at here and my partnership with the Frontier Science and Technology Research Foundation. And I'll share some of the active and pending projects, including a summary statement from the peer review as a testimonial. Things are looking good, but there's some challenges moving forward, and I'll share that. And I'll also provide some sort of a background, a kind of status of affairs at peer institution. Next slide, please. So, as many of you are familiar with, there has been a fair amount of changes in how NIH thinks about supporting clinical trials starting around 2016. And I don't want to go through this, but in order for the clinical trials to produce a reliable and trustworthy data with rigors and transparency, they required good clinical practice training for the investigators and staff, and specific clinical trial RFAs and FOAs, and then requirements for single IRB for multi-site studies, and then NIH produce protocol templates and sort of working together with the FDA to support the IND and IDE studies. And then we know about the clinical trials, gov registration requirements, and result submission. And I think all these things really relate to the NIH desire for the whole a clinical trial support to be as transparent as possible, and so that the results that gets published and shared in the public domain get some form of a sort of a trustworthiness from the public. Next slide, please.
And KyungMann, do you have a poll that we want to try?
Oh, sure, yeah. This would be a good point. Yeah, go ahead. So the first poll is whether you have considered a multi-site clinical and healthcare research proposals to NIH or PCORI. So Tara, as Tara's collecting that, and you will share that results later, right?
I can share it in just a few minutes. We're about halfway.
Sure.
through
Okay, all right.
Okay, I'm gonna end the poll and share results really quick to keep us on
Okay.
track. here.
Oh, 59% have considered multi-site applications, 41 no. Well, thanks for participating in this poll. So 3 out of 5, that's very good. Thank you. Next slide, please. So this one provides some of the detailed information about all these the NIH stewardship related sort of requirements, such as clinicaltrials.gov registration and summary results that became effective in September 21st of 2016. Good clinical trial training requirements, clinical trial specific FOAs. I've included some of the notice of from the Office of Directors, and use of single IRB protocol template, both for the sort of a traditional drug or device intervention studies, but also for behavioral and social sciences research involving human subject. And I think one of the latest policy that really affects all of us is the requirements for data management and sharing as of January 25th of 2023. I think the university has been working on developing some support in this arena, but I think this is something that investigator had to be aware of. Next slide, please. So this is a specific sort of NIH policy on clinical trial application. So you can only apply for specific FOAs that requires clinical trial. And you will find that some basic translational science FOAs will clearly state that clinical trials not allowed. And there may be some FOAs that would state clinical trial optional. But I think if you're looking at multi-site clinical trial support, you are really looking at the FOAs that where clinical trial is required. Next slide, please. So what is a data coordinating center? Data coordinating center is known also as a statistics and data management center. And in fact, some of you who does clinical trials in oncology will know that the Alliance for Clinical Trial in Oncology, they call their data coordinating center a statistics and data management center. And that sort of a role for the data coordinating center really has its origin in the old cooperative oncology group, which is now known as the National Clinical Trial Network. So for example, UW has been very active from very early days of the Eastern Cooperative Oncology Group, where late Dr. Paul Cabron served as its group chair with its operations office. And as I'm going to mention later on, the operations office is sort of like a clinical coordinating center. That's the terminology that we use. And then statistical center for the ECOG, which still at Dana-Farber Cancer Institute, is the statistics center with the data management activities in their headquarters in downtown Boston. And so some trials may require, such as phase 2 and sort of later stage, that is multi-site randomized control trials, and healthcare research studies may require data coordinating center independent of a clinical coordinating center. So I listed some examples, PAR 22-193 under U24 mechanism paired with the PAR 22-192 under UG3 and UH3 mechanism. There are many examples, but I just want to mention that this was studied by Mike Lauer, who is now NIH Deputy Director for Extramural Research. And this separation of clinical coordinating center and data coordinating center actually started when Mike Lauer was the division chief of Division of Cardiovascular Science at NHLBI. And so more and more NIH institutes are following this model of separating the clinical coordinating center under UG3 and UH3 and data coordinating center under U24 mechanism. And even PCORI adopted this approach in phased large awards for comparative effectiveness research that got studied around 2019. And the latest announcement, PFA, the PCORI funding announcement, is shown as an example. Next slide, please.
Okay, and did you want to try your next poll?
Sure, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. We'll give just
While we're waiting, KyungMann, I'll just
Sure.
start doing the questions as well. So a
Sure.
question from Ellen Wald is, I am assuming that a multi-site observational study would also benefit from a data coordinating center. Is that?
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah.
Thank you.
So 55% responded, said yes, that they are aware that some multi-site proposals will require independent data coordinating center. Yes. Thank you. Next slide, please. So I would like to share a few slides about data coordinating centers best practices. You note that I put the data in parentheses. The reason is because when NHLBI held working group on data coordinating centers best practice, they at the time didn't really make the distinction between clinical versus data coordinating center. And in fact, the participants in this working group was mainly running a clinical trial operations, including all aspects of that. And so that's why I put a parenthesis in data coordinating center. And they developed a checklist that includes 4 main components in this checklist. And whenever I get to work on a proposal, multi-site studies, I pull this checklist out. And you can easily find through the NHLBI webpage, or I can share that at the end of the presentation. But this 4 main components in the checklist covers clinical trial operations, data management, quality control and quality assurance activities, and human subject protection and regulatory affairs. And the reason why they have this separation of data and a clinical coordinating center is in fact an attempt in enhancing reproducibility through rigor and transparencies in the trial conduct, data collection management, analysis and reporting, so that they will have more of a trustworthiness in the NIH-funded multi-site clinical trials. You can find out more about this aspect in the indicated URL. Next slide, please. So how do you divide? And so in the next 4 slides, I listed each of the 4 items, but how I typically think about sort of dividing up the effort required from the clinical coordinating center versus data coordinating center. So clinical studies and trial operations requirement include program initiation, communication among the clinical sites, administrative coordination that could include trial site reimbursement for patient enrollment and the effort, study planning and management, and publication and presentation development. Typically, I think of this as a requirement for the clinical coordinating center. Next slide, please. The data management has to provide support for global and data security and data systems used for collecting, managing, and supporting quality assurance and quality control sort of systems, and also reporting of the studies, not just the reporting of the study at the end of the day, but throughout the life cycle of a study, reporting on accrual, reporting on protocol deviation, reporting on adverse events to the required sort of entities, and including statistical analysis. And one of the components is the randomization schemes that is critical in maintaining the integrity of the trials. And these responsibilities will typically fall within the realm of the data coordinating center. Next, please. And the third requirement is the quality control and quality assurance, sort of independent of the people who's actually doing the trial. So that's why responsibilities for these activities typically fall within the realm, within the purview of the data coordinating centers. And quality control is more of a sort of a monitoring of the trial conduct, not just the data quality, but also trial conduct quality itself. Quality assurance typically involves auditing of the the study that could involve review of the regulatory compliance and informed consent and many other aspects. And all of these has to be conducted under the good clinical practice promulgated in the International Council for Harmonization document E6 revision 2. The next slide, please. The human subject protection and regulatory affairs can fall in any other places, but this involves directly developing IRB sort of requirements and providing human subject protection and meeting the FDA and OHRP regulatory requirements. Typically, this falls within the clinical coordinating centers. And there's really no strict way. And I typically think of division of this labor and responsibilities based on the expertise and resources available in under the investigators. Okay, and as long as you meet the requirement, I think you are okay. Next slide, please. So these are the requirements for a successful data coordinating centers. You need an expertise in biostatistics and clinical trial methodology to support the protocol development, monitoring, conduct, analysis, and reporting. And also, as part of the data coordinating center, you need the resources in clinical research, informatics, and information technology and systems to support data management activities and quality control and quality assurance activities. So you may ask a question, what about the resources and activities, expertise at UW? I feel comfortable to state that the Biostat and Medical Informatics department has an expertise in these areas of biostatistics and clinical trial methodology attested by 3 textbooks. Those of you who has taken 542 or 544 will recognize fundamentals of clinical trials, where the founding chair of the department, Professor David Demet, was part of. And then the second textbook, Introduction to Statistical Method for Clinical Trials, sort of developed more for the statisticians to learn about clinical trial methodology, edited by Tom Cook, my colleague, and Professor David Demet. And the last one is called A Handbook of Statistical Method for Randomized Controlled Trial that I edited with other colleagues. In terms of the resources required in clinical research informatics, including information technology and systems, and the solution I found was a partnership with the Frontier Science and Technology Research Foundation, which I can explain furthermore later on. Next slide, please. So, what is the mission of the Data Coordinating Center as part of the clinical trial program in the department and also at the University of Wisconsin? Is to support UW Investigator-Initiated multi-site clinical trials and healthcare research studies with the expertise in biostatistics and clinical trial methodology, and resources in data management and quality control and quality assurance expertise. And engage, and the other main component of our mission for the clinical trial program is to engage in clinical and healthcare research workforce development with the ICTR. We have program in Certificate in Fundamentals of Clinical Trials, clinical research, and graduate program in clinical investigation, both MS, PhD, and minor PhD minor program. And we provide teaching support for two of the core courses, Introduction to Clinical and Healthcare Research in BMI 542, and Introduction to Clinical and Healthcare Research 2 in BMI 544. Next, please. So what is a Frontier Science and Technology Research Foundation? It was incorporated in 1975 in Amherst, New York, just outside of the SUNY Buffalo campus, by Marvin Zellen, who was then a ECOG group statistician. And that foundation supported data management for the Eastern Cooperative Oncology Group. But this got started at the request of the former ECOG group chair, late Paul Carbone, who was then director of the UW Clinical Cancer Center, and the ECOG Operations Office, kind of counterpart in Clinical Coordinating Center, was at the UWCCC during 1977 to 1991. And Frontier Science has been collaborating with the Department of Biostatistics and Medical Informatics since around 2000 in supporting data management for multi-site clinical studies. So formal name is Frontier Science and Technology Research Foundation, but their website and the logo is shown in the bottom. Next, please. So this is the mission of the Frontier Science, is to advance application of statistical science and practice and data management techniques in science, healthcare, and education. It's a not-for-profit organization with 5 offices. The headquarters in Amherst, New York, and Boston since 1977, Madison, Wisconsin, since 1997, when Dr. Paul Carbone retired from the University of Wisconsin. King Craig, Scotland since 2002, and Athens in Greece in 2007. Suzanne Sminsky is the president and CEO, and they have a little shy of 300 staff members. Some of you may remember Sue Sminsky gave a clinical trials community of practice presentation in November of 2022, describing the importance of validation of data collection and management systems in supporting clinical trials. Next slide, please. So the reason I go and work with Frontier Science is the breadth and depth of expertise in data management, software engineering, website development, database management system, IT operations, quality control and quality assurance activities, regulatory compliance, education and training. They have a very strong training mechanism in supporting multi-site investigation, trials and healthcare research. Technical writing, they do medical coding, study building in electronic data capture system and the database management system. User support 24/7, almost 360 days, because they covered not just the national programs, but also international program all over Africa, South America, Asia, and Europe. And they have a specialized system for participant registration and randomization. They participated in the Clinical Data Interchange Standard Consortium, and then they provide electronic trial master file and other administrative support and visualization. Next, please. These are some of the research projects. They have a significant focus on HIV and AIDS, and through the Harvard School of Public Health, they are the data coordinating center for AIDS clinical trial group and the impact and epidemiological study known as FACS, and International Breast Cancer Study Group, NHLBI funded HIV study in cardiovascular patients through Reprieve. Olympia is a large pharmaceutical company funded breast cancer clinical trial. And then they are part of the CPCTNet DMAC and also the Cascade network that Nasia mentioned. And I'm gonna sort of revisit them later on. Next slide, please. Now, one of the main component, key technology that is so critical for the data coordinating center is the clinical trial data management system, which is different from clinical trial management systems such as Encore that the cancer center uses and the ICTR uses. And even cancer center is now using research electronic data capture system, REDCap system, in supporting data management for their cancer clinical trials. So REDCap system is nice in the sense that it costs little or none through the School of Public Health, Medicine and Public Health and ICTR. But the main limitation is that it cannot support multi-site studies. So for example, Dr. Heather Johnson and later Dr. Carrie Hoppy and I supported or worked on My Heart trial, and it involved just UW and the Aurora Health System in Milwaukee. And we couldn't use the system. I mean, we used the system, but we couldn't deploy it at Aurora. So what ended up happening in the study is that we got the paper copy of the data capture system, and we entered the data here at UW, which is this day and age is just not acceptable. So there are other systems such as REDCap Cloud, which is a commercial version of REDCap that uses the cloud computing. Open Clinica is one such system that we have used. And most of you may have heard Medidata Array, and there are many other commercial systems. And they all support multi-site studies in a cloud computing setting. And we essentially use their system at Frontier Science and Technology Research Foundation. And it doesn't cost us. I mean, eventually somebody has to pay for it through the funding, but the managing and hosting these clinical data management system is under the purview of the Frontier Science and Technology Research Foundation. Next, please.
I think we have
this will be a
poll that we'd like to try.
Yes, this will be a good point. Yep. Did you know that UW has a DCC in the Department of Biostatistics and Medical Informatics? Fifty-fifty. Okay. So now 100% knows that we have a data coordinating center in the BMI department. Thank you. Next, please. In the next several slides, I will show you the data coordinating center project that got started since around 2014. So we haven't been around that long, barely about 10 years. But we have been successful, as you will see, and with the data coordinating center, oftentimes it is one investigator who needed the data coordinating center, and that gets the institution started. So in 2013, Early Vardeni, then at the School of Pharmacy, approached the department and developing a essentially at the time was a pilot study proposal on the R34 to study different doses of influenza vaccine in preventing hospitalization and all-cause mortality in patients with a high risk for those events because they had a recent myocardial infarction or a hospitalization due to heart failure. So this study became known as an investigator trial, and it ended up enrolling over 5,000 participants from 157 sites throughout Canada and United States. And the data coordinating center was housed at Brigham and Women's House, a hospital, with Dr. Scott Solomon and Dr. Early Vardeni as the MPI. And the data coordinating center was housed at the Department of Biostatistics and Medical Informatics. And we had sub-contact with the Frontier Science Foundation for data management and monitoring support. And we used the Open Clinica. And this was the first ever NIH DCC awarded to the University of Wisconsin. And since that time, we had more opportunity to sort of develop data coordinating center opportunities. Next slide, please. This is the second of such project, fecal microbiota transplantation for C. difficile infection in solid organ transplant recipient. Dr. Nasia Safdar was a PI, and this application under which we went in did not require separation of clinical coordinating center and the data coordinating center. But because it involved March sites, as listed here, UW, Indiana, Mayo, Ohio State, Northwestern, and Middleton, VA, we wrote the grant as if there's a separate data coordinating center. And we subcontracted with the Frontier Science and proposed to use the data management using Open Clinica and providing site monitoring support. Next one, please. This is a currently active study. The Cancer Prevention Clinical Trial Network is a program of the NCI's Division of Cancer Prevention. And this network conducts early phase clinical trial in cancer prevention agent development. The network uses a UG1 funded site known as a lead academic organization. There are 5 of them, MD Anderson, Northwestern, Arizona, Michigan, and UW. And each LAO has between 10 to 15 what they call affiliated organizations. So each LAO is a network of its own, but we provide centralized data management, auditing, and other coordinating activities, including support for what is known as a cross-network clinical trial, where we are responsible as a statistical center. Again, we have subcontracted with Frontier Science with Sue Sminsky as the sub-PI. Next, please. So for this network and the data management and auditing and coordinating center, coordination of trans-network activities take place at UW, which include administrative and coordinating support, operations management, and biostatistics and clinical trial methodology. And we support clinical trial auditing jointly between UW and Frontier Science. So, for example, Dr. Julie Chang in the Medical Oncology and Hematology Supportive Care Division is the unit director. And data management and reporting is housed at Frontier Science, and they are responsible for CPC-TNet central database. So all the data that we collect is housed in their central database management system. And we rely on the resources and establish infrastructure at Frontier Science for clinical research informatics, information technology, and system. And what's really nice about this arrangement is that because Frontier Science is dealing with multiple projects, with multiple networks and many, many sites, whenever there's the clinical informatics sort of a requirement arises, they have the expertise. They've done that. They are doing it for the other studies. So it's really a nice arrangement because we only buy the expertise and resources when we need them. So it has been a very nice arrangement from that perspective. Next slide, please. The next project is the HIV Cervical Cancer Prevention Cascade Clinical Trial Network. Again, this is also a program of the NCI's Division of Cancer Prevention. And different from the CPC-TNet, this network conducts pragmatic clinical trials evaluating the effectiveness of clinically proven intervention in intended use setting to optimize cervical cancer screening and pre-cancer treatment cascade for women living with HIV. So this is more like a phase 4 studies that the network will be doing. So they use the UG1 mechanism to fund what they call research bases. So each of the 3 research base is its own coordinating center, but we provide the centralized support in data management and other activities. And then they have UG1 funded clinical sites involving 7 African sites in low and middle income countries and 2 US sites with health disparities and HIV and cervical cancer prevention setting. One is based in Baltimore, University of Maryland, Baltimore. The other is based in Emory University to cover the state of Georgia. And the U24 funded coordinating center is very similar. There's some differences, but it's very similar to the CPC-TNet DMAC. Next, please. So we are funded with Sue Sminsky and myself as the MPI. And at Frontier Science, they are responsible for data management and reporting and the clinical trial auditing. But Dr. Anna Barbara Moschinski, she's a pediatrician who treats HIV and HPV at UCLA. So she leads the clinical trials auditing unit. And we provide at the department network coordination and scientific review of the concept and protocols. And we provide network-wide biostatistics and clinical trials methodology support. Next, please. We just recently submitted a huge project on January 9th. And the title is Comparing Decolonization Approaches for the Reduction of Surgical Site Infection, known as the DEFINE study. And it was in response to a PCORI funding announcement for Cycle 3, 2023 funding cycle under faced a large award for comprehensive comparative effectiveness research known as a PLACER. So this one, similar to the UG3 and UH3 mechanism, it has feasibility phase funded for 1.5 years and full study phase that funds for 5 years. It was submitted with Dr. Nasia Safdar as the PI and also as the coordinating center PI. And so the coordinating center is physically under the Department of Medicine. I presume that's correct, right? And I serve as a dual PI and as a data coordinating center PI at the department. And we also have some contact with the Frontier Science with Susminski as the sub PI. Next, please. And in the next few slides, I just want to share a timeline. I probably should cut that short. A summary statement from the peer review for some of the past and the current projects. And I'll just leave it to you to sort of read through it. And what the reviewers have recognized is the strengths that we combine between the biostat department here at the UW and the Frontier Science Foundation as the data management center. And it shows through in the Invested Trial summary statement. Next slide, it shows through the FMT Recover trial. And they recognize that use of data coordinating center is essential for the sort of multi-site study, although the RFA did not require it, and they just loved it. And the next one is the CPCTNet, please. Yes, and I'll just ask you to sort of read through that. And the next one for the Cascade Coordinating Center. So Frontier Science has a data management center going back to 1975. So they're gonna celebrate their 50th anniversary next year in the fall. And so Frontier Science is quite well known, particularly in the world of NIAID, and they've been getting into NCI and NHLBI and other sort of institutes at the NIH. Next, please. As the slide indicated, and we've been successful, there remain some challenges. The key challenge for us is that there's a shortage of clinical biostatistics faculty to what they call warm body issues, who is experienced in leading and knowledgeable about data coordinating centers requirements, and also being able to sustain the teaching of BMI 542 and 544. And as some of you may know, the department is in a sort of a crisis mode right now. We lost a senior clinical biostatistics faculty member, and I'm looking to retire in a not too distant future. And it's going to be very challenging. The other issue is the staffing issues. We do not have a dedicated master level biostatisticians, and we do not have dedicated research coordinators and support staff. And essentially, we do not have any core support from the school and the university. And the sort of the downside of it was that several UW investigators opted for data coordinating centers outside of UW because of these issues. Examples include Research Triangle Institute, Duke University, and University of Michigan, because we just didn't have the bandwidth and some of the resources required to be successfully support the applications and projects. Next, please. So what is it like at our peer institutions? There are programs that support only the extramural projects. So for example, George Washington University Biostat Center, they support NICHD and the NIDDK projects. They don't support George Washington University investigators at all. Harvard and the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute, they have coordinating centers in partnership with the Frontier Science. They support extramural programs. They don't support intramural programs at all. Penn State University is somewhat like that. University of Iowa, that supports a number of NDS, National Institute of Neurologic Disease and Stroke. Yeah, NDS. They support extramural investigators network. University of Minnesota Biometrics and Coordinating Center is the same. They support the AIS projects through the network and the NHLBI network projects. University of Michigan is similar. UNC Chapel Hill, the Lipid Coordinating Center, that's what they do, support outside projects. University of Texas School of Public Health is the similar, and they exclusively rely on NIH funding to support extramural projects. Some sites, institutes support both intramural and extramural projects. Johns Hopkins, Mayo, Medical University of South Carolina, University of Utah, University of Washington, Fred Hutchinson Cancer Research Center, University of Pittsburgh, and they have institutional core support to provide intramural projects. What is it like here at the University of Wisconsin? Next slide, please. We essentially have developed this data coordinating center sort of expertise and resources, bootstrapping off of NIH funding because we have no core support, and department have provided limited funding when you have a gap. But as I mentioned earlier, Investi trial got us started in data coordinating center as a necessity to meet the need of our UW investigators. And I always sort of think about those of you who weren't born before 1989 would not recognize, may not recognize this. And I follow this sort of idea. If you build it, he will come, from the movie The Fields of Dream for the Shoeless Joe story from I guess Chicago Cubs, I guess, in the early 1920s. So that's how we've been building it. We've been building, and we are fortunate to have the partnership with the Frontier Science. And in fact, when we were developing Investi trial, I tried ICTR, and I went to the then ICTR director, because Biostat department used to have a data management expertise, but that resources were moved to ICTR. The director said, oh, they're all spoken for. And so then next day I talked to my chair, then chair, and I asked him whether he's interested in investing sizable chunk of department resources. And I can understand because it was kind of, risky. He said, no, thank you. The next day, I flew out to Frontier office in Amherst and presented the study. And that's how the partnership started. Because UW did not have any resources or financial, wherewithals to build data coordinating centers. And so we essentially started with a few staff members and statisticians in the department. But without partnership with the Frontiers, I could not have been able to do what we have been doing so far. And apparently, someone in the higher ups in the dean's office noticed that when we get $12 million project, for example, the CPCTNet, much of the money goes out. And apparently someone asked the former chair, can we keep that money at UW? And Dave Dimet's answer to the senior leader's question was, do you have about $5 to $10 million in your pocket to invest? And the senior leader just shut up because it's the kind of resources to build it from ground up. And it didn't cost anything to the university. And we have these resources to be able to support UW investigators to do multi-site randomized clinical trials and healthcare research studies. Next slide, please. So here's the contact information. And Kelly Miller, as some of you know, she used to be a clinical research coordinator. So I intentionally hired someone like her because I need to understand the issues from the other side of the sort of a fence in clinical coordinating center. It's been really, really helpful because I understand what the issues are from the clinical perspective. So with that, I'll conclude my presentation, and I'll be happy to sort of answer any questions.
Thank you so much, KyungMann. That was
Yeah.
just great. There are a few
Thank you.
questions in the
Right.
chat. And so one of them is, does the UWDCC utilize direct data entry, and how is that set up?
Right. So we use either Redcap Cloud or Metadata Array, Open Clinica. So the site enters the data directly. So the Frontier builds the data collection sort of schemes into either Redcap Cloud or Open Clinica or Metadata Array.
Great, thank you. And then
Thanks.
Jane, yeah.
Yeah, thanks
Sorry.
for correcting. Yeah, at least I know University of Iowa got started when one of the investigators approached the senior faculty members to build a data coordinating center, just like I did. And I guess I visited their center actually twice in the 2000s. And I guess they have expanded to go beyond the extramural programs. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Now, this you may already have answered in part, but
Yeah.
can ICTR build in core support for DCC?
Well, ICTR, in my point of view, invested somewhat in supporting clinical coordinating center for multi-site studies through the winter and March. But I don't know of any investment from ICTR on the DCC side.
Thanks.
We can. Again, you saw the number of staff members they have at Frontier just to support multi-site trials, 270 some people.
Here's the next question. So how does the Alzheimer's disease research group work as far as the DCC goes? Does geriatrics and gerontology utilize the DCC for their
No,
clinical
they
trial?
haven't. Yeah,
And
in
some
fact,
of
I
them-
don't know. I don't know what's happening. One time, Jim Gurn approached me for, I forgot the name of the project. And it was a large project with a $60 million price tag. And he had to sort of coordinate and centralize a data set from 19 centers throughout the country. And I believe they are developing that expertise right now internally.
Sounds good. I think one other point is that certain consortia and disease conditions have their own national DCCs as well.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And so there may be a
Yes.
requirement to go through those. But for most of us that are writing, investigator-initiated trials that are not in those disease areas, there's very limited resources that are available. Kelly, thank you for pointing out ECHO.
Yeah. So as you know, the investigators at the Cancer Center, they have access to, ECOG, Acrins, Alliance, and SWOG and other centers. So all they have to do is to develop the study concept and approve. And then existing infrastructure that NCI has invested for almost 50 years come into play in supporting the studies. So cancer world is somewhat different, but more and more disease areas sort of are interested in creating a national centralized resources to support the investigations. And one of the issues that arises quite often, at least when I was serving on the clinical trial review committee for the NHLBI, is that oftentimes DCCs are set up one-off to support a study. And when the study ends, what happens? So in fact, that was the reason I have to sort of think about how we can sort of sustain these activities. And fortunately for me, the CPCTNet came about. I've been working with Howard Bailey as the PI of the this early phase clinical trial program since 2000. And then finally, DCP decided to create a centralized coordinating center in about 5 years ago now, so 6, 7 years ago. And that's when I applied for the CPCTNet, because I've been working with these folks for almost 15 years.
Thank you. Mail asks a question for rare
Yeah.
diseases for which there are DCCs with expertise in clinical trials. What would the NIH preference be, the local DCC versus established DCCs with expertise in rare diseases?
Well, it depends on the RFA. I mean, if there's a established expertise in a center, they're probably going to have RFAs that'll continue to support that the data coordinating center, and investigator goes through some network, clinical coordinating centers to do the study. For example, I recently saw, no, actually, I was asked to serve on a study section for number of NIAID sort of coordinating centers, and they were creating central coordinating center, data coordinating centers to support number of different sort of conditions, but then they were also creating a sort of clinical coordinating centers where investigator will go through to get the support. So I think this is a sort of a changing landscape in some ways. Yeah.
Excellent, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Please put them in the chat. Just a reminder to everyone, our next clinical trial COP will be May 15th, and Marcus Johnson, who is the VA's national program lead for their clinical trials or nodes infrastructure, will be speaking.
There's a comment from Miaela. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what's the future of DCC here? Yeah, I think that, one of the challenges with DCC, as KyungMann alluded, is that you have to have the infrastructure in place to make a compelling case that you have the access to the resources you need. And having to do that on the fly when you will get a good score is probably not the time to do it.
Right, yes.
It has to be done well ahead of time. So failing that, what people do is they either go to other available DCCs or they find some other places where you can pay them. And the downside to that is that a lot of money leaves the UW system when in fact it could stay here and help in building that infrastructure. So it's a bit of a chicken and egg situation.
Yeah. The other thing that I constantly remind my colleagues in the department is that as a statistician, you have established, working collaboration with the investigator to have had some track record of collaborating together. And then that statistician has to think about, if the investigator want to do a multi-site studies that requires separate data coordinating center to be able to put the resources together. And that's what I've been saying. And in the slide I showed you with the field of dream, that's what I've been trying to do. Build the sufficient resources in the department so that an investigator would like to propose multi-site study with a partner statistician with a proven track record, then we can support that activities, and it'll have a more of a sort of a traction and sort of a higher chance of getting funded. Yeah.
Thank you so much, KyungMann. Really appreciate your time today. We are at time. So thank you again for your presentation, and thank you to all the participants for attending. Bye-bye.
I just want to reiterate for your interest in this data coordinating centers, and Kelly and I are readily available through email. So if you have any questions or comments, suggestions, we'll be more than happy to address that.